Well, hello and welcome back to a steaming hot cup of Elevate Ordinary. Today we're talking coffee. Here in a moment. Welcome back to Elevate Ordinary. I'm your host, JonMarc Grodi, with my co-host, Teresa, my wife.
Hey.
I never know how to intro that.
I don't know what to say either.
It's goofier every time.
Hey, goofy's good.
But we've got a fun episode for you today. We've got our friend and my colleague, Seth Paine, here with us today. Seth, welcome. I can't really reach you through my microphone, but we are going to talk about coffee today.
Yeah, coffee. Coffee, one of my favorite subjects.
Yeah, and one of our favorite subjects. I think when we met and we started working together, so we work together in the Coming Home Network International, which is my father's apostolate. We help people who are thinking about becoming Catholic. You can check that out at www.chnetwork.org. But I think when we met early on, we figured out, we both like coffee.
Yeah, we both like coffee. And I remember the first place that we worked together was in your basement.
Yes.
And there were some downsides to that, but one of the upsides was we had access to your stove.
Yes.
And I remember the first coffee that we had a lot together was I brought over my Turkish pot.
Oh, yes.
And so I would make some Turkish coffee every day for our little coffee break.
So why are we talking about coffee, though? And I wanted to just go back a moment to the theme of the show, Elevate Ordinary. Our idea here is to dig into ordinary or apparently ordinary aspects of daily life and look for the presence of God, look for the opportunities. We've been talking a lot about virtue lately. These opportunities every day in the little acts to build virtue and vice, or to draw closer to God, to draw closer to other people, to grow an appreciation of the world that God's given us, of the purposes he's made us for, of the great gift in our bodies and of nature, God's second book. And so, again, you could really pick any leaping off point. There's a quote from Chesterton that I couldn't find today, although I Googled like a madman trying to find it. But at some place he's saying, the difficulty sometimes for a Christian to explain why he believes is that there's a million reasons. That the deeper you go into your faith, the deeper you come to know God, like every little thing bespeaks God's glory and his wonder and his generosity to you. And so coffee for me is one of those things, but our point today is also to go deeper into how anything in life can bear that out. And I guess the way to begin that, the thought that I had is to begin talking about like two general ways you might go about your life. And the two words I had in mind were breadth and depth. It's very easy in today's world with, the internet and with a lot of the freedom that we have, the freedom to move around, the freedom to purchase, the freedom to transportation, information. It's easy to live a life of breadth, wide array of experience, a million miles wide, but maybe an inch deep. And there can be a fear of not having enough experiences. Right. Of not missing out. Right.
FOMO.
Yes.
It's the one thing I know from popular culture in the last 10 years.
FOMO.
Is that correct?
FOMO.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Missing out.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong.
Sounds good.
Yeah, if I don't get out and do all the things, I'm somehow going to miss something.
But then when you do get really deep into something, the more you get into it, the more you realize that fear is unfounded, because you're like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I've discovered something new.
Right.
And you keep discovering new things.
Yeah.
And you don't have to go all over the world. You don't have to try every single thing and exhaust yourself.
Yeah.
To really keep discovering new things.
Right. Well, there is a little bit of a trade-off though, right?
Yeah.
That life is short, and if you throw all of your lot in breadth, trying to have a bunch of novel experiences, trying to do everything, if there's this other axis, so to speak, of depth, and you never explore that, then you are going to miss something. There is something perhaps more important. I think that's part of our idea, is you're going to miss something even more important.
Well, and you could probably say it goes the other way too. If you focus too much on one thing, and just keep going deeper and deeper in one thing, then you might miss out on something else.
Right.
So it is a balance. It is, it's, we've talked about a lot, this both and of just seeing what is coming and what God has given you for that day.
Right. Right. Also, the way I like to think of it too is this question of, we tend to think of our culture as a consumerist, materialist culture. Like we're too focused on stuff. But I guess a question that's come to my mind is, as a culture, do we like stuff, love stuff too much, or perhaps in a certain sense too little? Because certainly as Christians, there's a way to love the world and love stuff that's improper. Like we're from, like we know that an attachment that would keep us away from God. But it seems like that's not. It seems like in our culture that we have that, this consumerism, the desire to have everything, the desire to just like eat a bunch of junk food and move on to the next thing.
Well, and I think there's to get into the coffee part of it. I think part of that, one of the issues with that is we wanted, in the consumerist mentality, we want everything to be easy and quick. And, that was my experience of coffee for a long time. I just wanted to get my coffee. Whether it was going out to Dunkin' Donuts or just, doing something, getting some store-bought coffee and, doing it in my coffee machine. And I realized that I think like a lot of people, my assumption was, well, if I want to have coffee, I want it to be easy, I want it to be quick, but I'm going to have to put some sugar and cream in it because I want it to taste good. And so that was my experience for a number of years of course I can't have coffee without having something in it.
Yeah. And I feel like there's, again, a lot of this in our culture, it pushes us to that shallow experience of life where we want to try everything and we want it to be as cheap and as quick as possible, but we resist anything that takes effort, takes virtue to go a little deeper in, which again, it sounds weird on the surface, but we're getting somewhere with this,
and it does have to do with coffee.
Yeah.
So in God's created world, everything down to the tiniest blade of grass is awesome. And while you were speaking, like I was thinking about how, like now that we're coffee people, and I fought this for a long time because I'm the one who budgets for the food, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like we could spend half as much and still get our coffee fix, and we could have more, and we could have, we wouldn't have to be quite as careful with all of our coffee beans because they wouldn't be so darn expensive. But when you do make these trade-offs, and when you make a trade-off, you lose some of the awe in the created thing. So now that we make coffee from fresh whole beans, there is like the coffee bean is incredible. And the way that you make it, the different methods that you make it produce a different kind of look, a different kind of smell, a different kind of depth. And I find myself instead now in a position of awe. And when I take we're going to get canceled by our own producers, but when I take the pre-ground coffee and, throw it in my coffee machine and make it, I lose some of that awe, and it does become something that I just consume to get my caffeine. Like I just need my caffeine and I'm going to consume it. But I feel like a little bit of part of me has been traded.
Yeah. Well, going back, when we started working at your house and we were doing the Turkish coffee, there's a process in that takes a lot of patience. I mean, the grind has to be so fine, and I've been using this since we started doing that. Been using a hand grinder, and so it takes a long time. It takes almost 10 minutes to grind coffee for a Turkish pot for 2 people with the hand grinder. But it's worth it. And then you need to watch the pot. Yeah. And you need to make sure it doesn't boil over. And you need to make sure it's just the right temperature. You have to start with the right temperature. You have to grind just the right way. But there's an aspect to that, like you're saying about awesome. Being awesome is this. It's almost meditative when you're making the coffee. You're focusing on what needs to be done. You're focusing on what will make it the best coffee it can be. You're not just, throwing everything into a pot and just turning it on and letting it sit for, 10, 15 minutes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But you really need to look at it. You need to focus on it.
It seems, again, trying to just think on the theoretical level here for a moment. Our relationship to stuff, our relationship to this world, again, on the one hand, there seems to, whatever we want to call it, there seems to be an attached, desirous, consumptive sort of attitude toward things. And certainly as Christians, we want to keep away from that. And that's sort of, loving this stuff for its sake. On the other extreme, getting into things, I feel like probably what's in some people's minds when they hear people talking about coffee or wine or cigars or cooking or something like that, there's always this sense of, well, this is sort of snobby. Are you looking down on my regular cup of coffie? And that's there's issues there too. Yeah. But again, what we're aiming for in the middle is this relationship to things, wherein there's an increase in our wonder and our gratitude for those.
Well,
things.
and there's a joy in it. I remember the first time in my life that I ever had really good coffee.
Yeah.
I went out with a group of friends to an Ethiopian restaurant in Boston. And one of my friends that went, she, at the time, this was before I had ever worked at Starbucks and really knew much about coffee. She was working at Starbucks at the time. And so one of the reasons that she wanted to go there was because of the coffee. And so at the end of dinner, she ordered it was a Turkish coffee, and they came out with the coffee, and I, not knowing anything about coffee, I was about to put cream in it. And she's like, stop. And she didn't deride me for it. She didn't say, oh my goodness, I can't believe you would ever put cream in this. But she just looked at me and she said, you know what? I think you should try it first. Just try it without any cream.
Yeah.
And if you need to, it's fine if you put cream in it, but I just want you to try it first. And so I said, okay. I poured myself a cup and I took a sip. And, up to that time, my experience of coffee was, it's bitter, it's strong, and it needs something to make it taste better. This was the smoothest. I can only think of the word silky really to describe it. The smoothest, best tasting cup of coffee I've ever had in my life. So I said, oh my goodness, coffee can really be good. And I can pick up notes of different flavors that I've never thought that coffee could have. And so for coffee in my life, that was the time that I, said, wait a second, maybe I should understand coffee more.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, why is that? Let's think about that for a moment. There's a lot of these areas of life. Again, I think the number is almost infinite of these kinds of things where someone could, if they chose that thing, they could go deeper in it and discover whole new levels of appreciation for it. But most of the time we don't. There are barriers there. What prevents us?
I think part of it is a fear. Well, I would say coming from a Christian perspective, I think part of it is a fear that there is a joy. There's a joy in getting deeper into something, that you can really enjoy it, that it brings you joy, that it brings you pleasure. And as you said at the beginning, that it is something that points you towards God, that it is awesome. It gives you some awe. And how could God create something this amazing? And I think that there's a fear. I grew up as a Protestant, and I think it's a very common Protestant misconception about things, that it is either things or it is God that you find joy in.
Yeah.
And there isn't the Catholic both and understanding of I enjoy coffee, and therefore because I enjoy coffee, I can give glory to God because He created coffee.
Yeah, it's stated more explicitly in certain Protestant circles. This sort of duality, this division between the things of God and the things of the world. And while that's not Catholic teaching, it's funny and unfortunate that's still latent in many of our minds. Elsewhere here on AWAKEN Catholic, Andrew Reinhardt on his show Physically Spiritual is exploring a lot of this disintegration that even if we don't consciously believe it, we emotionally, we intuitively sort of believe that there's something bad or wrong about our bodies. There's something bad or wrong about the world. And we need to be focused on the spiritual stuff up here. But we are embodied beings. God created us that way, and he created us that way for a purpose. And yes, we can't be attached to things other than God, even other people, to the detriment of our relationship with God. But in the context of our relationship with God, we discover his glory and his majesty and his creativity in other people, in the things they make, and in the things that God's made that we discover. And that, as long as that's in its proper context, it's an amazing thing.
Yeah, we have a concept, whether we know it or not. We have a concept, I think, especially in our culture, that we are spirits inside bodies.
Right. Right. The ghost in the machine.
Yeah. And therefore, there are the spiritual things you can do. And then there are the things you have to do, to make sure you stay alive. And even finding joy in things, they're still kind of separate from our spiritual life.
Yeah. Okay.
No, we have friends who are regenerative farmers and they raise pigs. And so my kids see the pigs. And then when the pigs get slaughtered and we eat their bacon, the kids, you see them kind of trying to figure this out. But I love that piggy, and the bacon from the store doesn't come from that piggy, And so we start telling our kids that, like, God tells the piggy, well done, good and faithful servant. You're serving you're feeding my children. You're feeding, my beloveds. And when we were listening to Marie Kondo, like when she was really big on Netflix, well, she was big first and then she was big on Netflix. But she had this, this kind of idea where you need to thank the thing before it leaves your house, or even like her method of folding was kind of like, as you're folding, you're like thanking whatever she thinks. But like, I thank God that, like, oh yes, this clothes my children and it came from the rummage sale and someone else donated this and I didn't have to spend $20 of my food budget. Like when you're mindful of the fact that the thing that you are using has a purpose to serve God's most precious creation, it even brings like a whole new life and a joy and appreciation and an awe to making coffee or to folding laundry or to eating a pig,
I love that. I remember that example. I remember seeing Marie Kondo do that in the show. And it's funny because I think she comes probably from a Buddhist background, I would assume. So there's some aspects of that where as a Christian, you're kind of like, okay, clearly there's something going on here that's not Christian. But there's something about it that seems very right. And again, Catholicism has been doing this from the beginning. It's been recognizing when there's something good and right there. And that's that when we really are present with a part of God's creation, when we're really mindful with the thing. Again, Dr. Gregor Bottaro on Andrew's show, you got to check that out, talking about really being mindful in the present moment, the smell of the coffee, the scent, the warmth of the cup, the smoothness of the cup. We're really present with the thing. We're discovering God in an important way. Let me just read a couple quotes we've read here before, but these are kind of going along with this. This is Saint Jose Maria Escriva. There is something holy, something divine hidden in the most ordinary situations, and it is up to each one of you to discover it. There is no other way, my daughters and sons. Either we learn to find our Lord in ordinary everyday life, or we shall never find him. And then Jean-Pierre de Caussade, there is not a moment in which God does not present himself under the cover of some pain to be endured, of some consolation to be enjoyed, or of some duty to be performed. All that takes place within us, around us, or through us contains and conceals his divine action. So again, the point is, it's not a God in everything, God is everything. It's not that sort of maybe Buddhist or kind of idea, but it's recognizing that God created all things that he's created are good, and it's only in our embodied experience as beings in a place that we can encounter him.
Well, and using coffee as an example, realizing that there's so many ways to make coffee, and I have to admit, in between my house and the office, I think I have 8 or 9 different items that are used to make coffee of probably 5 or 6 different kinds. You got the coffee machine, got the French press, got the pour over, got the Turkish, got a couple of the Italian little espresso pots. But each one of those, as you're saying before, Teresa, each one of those, there's a different process. The flavor comes out differently, even using the same exact coffee. It tastes differently. It smells different, and so, when, at the office now we have the pour over, and it comes out so smooth. It takes out a lot of the acidity. Or you go for a good French press where it gets really strong and bold. French press, I think, is a great coffee for camping, because, when you're out, you wake up on a cold morning. One, you just have to, put the coffee in and pour in boiling water and let it sit there. But on a cold morning when you're camping, there's nothing like a really strong cup of coffee.
It's so true. All the times that I camp in cold things. No, I don't camp. I want to go back to something you had asked before. You asked Seth, why do you think that people don't go deeper and enjoy and experience whatever that question was that you asked? And in a way, I think that our relatively consumerist culture over the last since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution has bombarded us with decision fatigue. I don't go to my local tiny little corner store and have one can of soup to pick from, or one pasta brand to pick from, or one whatever. You have endless options. There's not one Kroger. There's Meijer, Kroger, Walmart, Whole Foods. There's just to care about something in our current culture causes it's stressful.
Right. Well, it's a decision fatigue, but they also try and push that they're making your decision easier. So you have a lot of things to decide between, but you don't have a lot of information about any one of them.
And you can't get information, because even if I tried to learn, even anyone who has had a marketing 101 for their own particular thing that they went to college for, or how to make your website for your particular business, you're never going to put anything negative on your website. You'll get fired, So it's you can't learn. And I think that the church's social teaching on subsidiarity really covers over a whole lot of this, because the closer you get to your lived situation and saying okay, where, do I live in a suburb? Do I live in the country? Do I live in the city? Okay, what in my own literal sphere of influence can I actually appreciate an artisan in my daily life? And I'm going to pick that, and I'm going to learn. And it's just a tiny step, but that tiny step, allows you to say, Alita was saying before we got on the show, I watched a documentary on cashews, how cashews are harvested, and that's really hard. So much effort goes into it, and I just buy a big old jug at Walmart. It's it allows you by being vulnerable in one area and saying, who is this artisan? I'm going to get to know them, or I'm going to support our friends, the regenerative farmers. We're going to choose to buy their milk, one thing. It does allow you the practice. The practice of being I wonder who made this, or I wonder, how big this company is, or where all the stuff comes from, or where the different parts are made. I want to find out more about this.
Well, and to get deep and spiritual with it, I think unfortunately in our culture, I think in America for a long time, but I feel like this is becoming worldwide. We have this expectation now, because of being in a consumerist mindset for so long, that our faith needs to be the same way. Our faith needs to be easy. Our faith needs to be quick. We need to go. We need to go to church. We need to hear a good homily. We need to get inspired, and we need to leave. And there isn't the call to depth. When I was thinking about this, preparing for the show, the verse that kept coming back to me was Philippians 2:12 and 13. Therefore, my beloved, as you have always obeyed, so now, not only as in my presence, but much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. For God is at work in you, both to will and to work for his good pleasure. So one of the things about that is it takes work.
Yeah.
Our faith takes work. I had always read this passage before in the reference of thinking, well, I need to make sure that I'm always right with God. Make sure that, that I'm good, that I'm saved, to use my previous language. But when I was thinking about getting ready for this show, I started to tie it to this idea of making coffee, or being a connoisseur of something, really wanting to know more about it. So working out your faith is this process of growing deeper in your faith. And when I became Catholic, it's been how many years now? 11 years, 12 years. 2008 is when I was confirmed. When I was preparing to become Catholic, one of the things that really drew me into the Catholic Church, I had been going to a non-denominational church that was very seeker-friendly. And I had gotten to a point where I said, well, I guess I've arrived. I'm a Christian. I go to church. I take part in missions work, and I'm good. All I have to do is keep doing this for the rest of my life, and I'm good. But one of the things that really enticed me and drew me into the Catholic Church was I realized, reading about the Catholic saints, reading the Catechism, reading all the teachings of the Church, that there is no end to how deep you can go in theology, in morality, even in the simple aspect of having a relationship with God. Yeah. There's no end to the depth. I could spend the rest of my life getting deeper and deeper into my faith. Yeah. And so tying it to coffee or anything else that you are a connoisseur of, it is not a growing deeper because you have to. It's not growing deeper because there's someone standing over your shoulder saying, if you don't grow deeper in this, you're going to go to hell, or you're going to miss out. But there is a desire, and the deeper you go, the stronger your desire becomes.
Yeah. Yeah, there's so many analogies in the faith. I just think of prayer as an example of this. Like thinking of it again in terms of breadth or depth. You could be. I think you can see that. You can imagine this happening, and I feel like I do see it happen a lot in the church, where you have people who they get into this consumptive attitude toward the faith itself. Like, I have to constantly have the Catholic radio on. I have to, every day, all day has to be constantly, constant news stream of data and facts and bites and commentary. And there's a lot of, find good content, watch AWAKEN Catholic and the Coming Home Network, and other good, sources of Catholic content, certainly. But there is a way that you could kind of, again, go for this breadth and never go deep, never take any of it to prayer, never be with God and go deeper in that relationship. And in some sense, that is the more important aspect, and so it can't be neglected.
Well, and if I could give a small plug here, I don't know when this is going to come out. I'm in the playing stages right now. I have my own YouTube channel, That Nerdy Catholic, and I've been off of it for about a year. I was doing a weekly vlog for a while, but I've been thinking about, should I be getting back into it? And in the last month or two, what I keep coming back to is that there are so many YouTube channels out there that talk about science. And when you watch them, you realize that the base assumption of these channels is an atheistic worldview. They're not being evangelistic of you should become an atheist, but when they come up with the assumption, and so when they come up with conclusions about what they're learning about in different areas of science, well, of course it means that we're the only ones here. It's just a material world. And I love watching them because some of the concepts are amazing. The possibility of a multiverse. Any concept of doing time travel. I'm a big nerd, which is why my channel is That Nerdy Catholic.
Makes sense.
But what I want to do is I want to have conversations. Actually, even I'm starting to come up with a list of different scientists that I could have on the show. Talk about the possibility of a multiverse and what does that mean with our faith. Are those two compatible? but not trying to be, here's the truth that the Catholic Church says about X, Y, and Z in science, but have a conversation about what's the new research? What's the new research in black holes? Looking at what's the size of the universe? That's something. Coffee is something that I nerd out on. And I love that phrase, nerd out. But I am a big nerd, and so I love thinking about science, and I love thinking about the implications on my faith for what is going on in science. And so there's so much out there talking about Catholic faith. Yeah. And there's so much out there talking about science, but you don't see a lot of overlap between the two. Yeah.
That sounds like a really neat project. I think you also bring out, another element which connects to our discussion here, which is this. I mean, even think about the word a nerd. So you're a nerdy Catholic, Think about, it's something we use all the time. We sort of intuitively know what we're meaning by, but what does it mean to be a nerd? Mm-hmm. And I think that it's helpful to think of by contrast, what is not a nerd. It's if you're a nerd, you're not maybe cool. If nerd is used in a negative sense in our culture. Mm-hmm. But think of what the word cool means. Think of what our culture means by cool. Think of where that began, that started. To be cool means to not be hot. It means to not be affected. If you're cool, you're unaffected by the world.
Yeah, there's you know what? I don't care.
There's this aloofness,
I don't care about that.
This pride, attitude. Whatever. That's this ethos that's kind of baked into our, weirdly. The whole other episode to explore that rabbit hole. But thinking about coolness, if we understand this weird ethos that we all sort of use in our common language and we to some degree look up to, there's some contrariness of coolness to what we're called to in the gospel, which is to be not cool, but childlike. We're to be in awe of God. We're to be excited. We're to be joyful. And this coolness, that's fine. That's interesting. But to be unaffected, to be unimpressed by the world, it's the,
Well, and we know what Jesus said in Revelations about people that are lukewarm.
Or not good coffee.
Was that the right Bible verse?
Well, it is the right Bible verse, and I think it's unfortunate that a lot of translations say, "I will spit you out of my mouth," because the literal translation says, "If you are neither hot nor cold, and because you are neither hot nor cold, I'm going to vomit you out of my mouth." That is strong language, and so you can't be a good evangelist if you're cool.
Yeah, so there's I've always thought it's interesting. Again, I think this would make a neat other episode, but there's a certain humility to being a nerd about whatever it is you're a nerd about. Cooking or gardening or coffee or science. There's a certain wonder, a childlike wonder that you're not ashamed of. That's part of it too. It's like, what, I don't care what the rest of the world thinks. I'm really into gardening, And there's something right and humble and virtuous about that I think is important.
Well, and you think about, I think what most people would think about as far as an image of a nerd, you think of, the Big Bang Theory, the show, and the quintessential image of a nerd just walking around in a superhero t-shirt.
Right.
I love superheroes. I don't care if people think I'm weird for wearing a Green Lantern shirt. And I'm saying that because I have a Green Lantern shirt.
I've seen it.
And, there's an aspect of, you know what, this is cool. I don't care if you agree with me or not. I love it.
So, again, we've covered a bunch of things, breadth and depth, connoisseurship, and this element of childlikeness that's inherent in going deep in something, going deep properly into a thing, part of God's creation, a craft, an art. It involves done well, done rightly, done authentically. It involves this humility, this childlikeness. And another effect of that is there's a communal element to it, because if I kind of let my guard down and I get excited about this thing, well, then I encounter other people who are excited about that thing. And as C.S. Lewis says, what friendship is finding another person saying, "You too? I thought I was the only one." Yeah. So there's this communal friendship element to getting deep in something as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there have been times where I've been at a coffee shop and I've made some comment and they're like, "Wow, you know about that?" It's like, "Well, I used to work at Starbucks," and they're like, "Oh, wow." And then so you get into this conversation. Yeah. with the person behind the coffee machine.
Right.
And there's shared experience, there's a shared knowledge, but there's also a shared love.
Yeah.
Of really, really getting into it.
Yeah. And Teresa, you were bringing up earlier the subsidiarity. Man, if you haven't seen it yet, you really have to check out elsewhere here on Awaken Catholic, Pete Range's first episode of The Catholic Vote, in which he explores the 3 foundational pillars of Catholic social teaching, which are human dignity, solidarity, and subsidiarity. And it's an amazing episode because even if you really are tired of politics, which I don't blame you, that episode is stepping aside from politics and looking at these 3 principles, which are so important and so widely applicable. And they're super applicable here because as you get into something, and again, today we're talking about coffee, that's our example here. You get into it, you learn about it, you begin to appreciate the methods, the types, the roasts, the origins. That then draws you closer to other people, and it also draws you to care about, well, how did that coffee get to me? And again, if we have those 3 Catholic principles that we're supposed to live by, this in terms of social teaching, human dignity, solidarity with fellow human beings, and subsidiarity, this wanting to be this preference for closeness and keeping things on the level that they're at. Then we begin to recognize that informs our decision making about these kinds of things too. Like, I should care. It should be my joy to know that, like our friends the Russells, that we get to enjoy their bacon, and they get to put food on the table and take care of their and pay their bills and stuff like that, because they're making a great product through their regenerative farming. The coffee company we've had a subscription to for a while. It's called Farmers First, and a buddy of ours, it was his brother was involved in forming that, but they worked on the supply chain and came up with a very simple process by which we could get coffee, but the farmers, and they had, and we got to know the farmers through their pictures and their videos and their interviews with these people to make sure that they were getting paid well for their good work. Yeah. And so that aspect too, as we go deep into things, we have these opportunities to grow in solidarity and subsidiarity with our fellow human beings.
I had a couple experiences where, back when I was living in Massachusetts, the parish that I went to had a relationship with a sister parish down in Honduras, and there's a coffee co-op within that parish, and I've actually had the opportunity to go down and visit the parish, but also the coffee co-op a couple of times, and to meet some of the farmers, to meet the people that were they were picking the beans, growing them, but also the people that were processing them and ended up sending them up to the U.S. for us, and the place that I still get all my coffee from. It's a great place, Dean's Beans. If you ever want, a little plug for them. If you ever want really good coffee, that you can order it online and they'll ship it to you. They do all fair trade. It's really actually very inexpensive for good coffee. But they would store it and they roasted it for the parish, and we would bring it out and sell it and send all the profits back to the co-op. But there was that aspect of relationship there as well, of finding the people that do it well, and building a relationship with them. Yeah.
Again, if this humility, this childlikeness, is part of this process of going deeper, and that it should be, then we become a student, and as we get into these areas, then we learn not just about the thing, but the processes, the people. That attitude of wonder is an important thing, and to cultivate it in one area is to engender it in other areas of your life. And so it's such an important thing.
And then to tie it back to your faith, if you love it and you really want to know more about it, and you're spending all your time getting to know more about it and getting deeper into it, you're not just going to sit by and take it all in for yourself. You're going to want to share it. You want to tell other people about it. Right. So I mean, like going back to what you were saying about being a snob, it can come off sometimes as being a snob. It's like, oh my goodness, you have got to try this. Being a real connoisseur and loving something means you're going to tell people about it. You don't want to be the person that says, oh my goodness, I cannot believe you're drinking that coffee.
Well, let's talk about that for a moment though, because that does happen. That happens with coffee. That happens also with our faith, right? Sometimes we evangelize in that way. Like, oh, you're doing this with your life. Ugh, you're
not
gross.
Going to Latin mass. Oh,
you're not into this social issue that I'm really into. Oh, you like that pope, or you like that bishop. Certainly, like that can happen, and that's bad. What do we want to say intelligent about that? Like,
I would say,
how does it happen? What's going on there?
to be controversial on a Catholic channel.
There we go.
I'm going to say, I would love to see more videos or podcasts or blog articles or whatever talking about why the Latin Mass is so beautiful. And talking about
positively, not controversially, not polarizing. Yeah.
I love the Latin Mass because 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
It has elevated my faith because of this or that. I think my issue with hearing so much about the Latin Mass within the past few months, so much of it is centered around the Latin Mass is the only way to go, and if you don't go to a Latin Mass, then you must not be a serious Catholic. Why? I'm not hearing why. I'm not seeing the passion for it. I'm just seeing if you don't do this, then you're not as good of a Catholic.
This is a personal struggle I'm going through right now, actually. Well, no, and we've been going to a Latin Mass a couple times because we want our son to be trained as a server there, because they have an army of young boys and young men who really take it seriously, and they seem joyful. And you go there and there's like 9 guys serving, and of course like Father Kidd, who's got a show on this channel, as the pastor, so it's always nice to see him. But like, I can't, like, I'm such a, what is it called? I always say it wrong. Novus Ordo.
Yeah, sure.
Like, I'm a cradle Catholic, Novus Ordo. My spirituality is a little more charismatic. I love faithful Orthodox Catholicism. Like, I'm not a wishy-washy Catholic out in, like wanting to make my own Mass. But when I'm there, I struggle. And I want people to tell me their own testimony, because I know that when you go to a Latin Mass, they're submissive to the liturgy. I know that, which is something I appreciate greatly. But I need to understand that the people in the pews, their life is being illuminated, and it's spilling forth into every other thing that they do, not just that this and so this is me just letting it all fly. Okay. Like, I'm willing to be convinced. I'm willing to be, I probably will never leave the I can't imagine, but this is like, yes, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree.
But how do we?
But going back to being a connoisseur,
but what
I want to know.
do they serve in the parish hall?
Yeah. Well, no, I want to know why. I don't want to hear you have to do it or you're not a good Catholic. Those arguments aren't good for me. I want to know why.
Yeah.
I mean, and like you said, testimonies are so much more powerful. And going back to being a connoisseur, when you tell people why you love something, or even just like my friend at the restaurant that said, just try it. Try it. I think you'll really like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. There's so many interesting parallels here. Yeah. Because, like, again, that's true.
So many rabbit holes.
It's true in life. It's true in the faith. There's many temperaments. There are many things to enjoy. There's many things to learn about in the faith. But how we share those in a testimonial way, do we share them from a place of personal pride and something that I've found that I appreciate, or do we find it from a place of wonder and awe and humility? And that's the all important thing, because that's no one. Well, what's the thing? People don't care what you know till they know you care, or something like that.
Yeah,
something like that. I always get it wrong. Yeah. So, man, we talked about all kinds of things. I want to end with a few fun questions to wrap this up. And one is, I'll start this with Seth here.
Right.
Is making someone a cup of coffee a corporal work of mercy or a spiritual work of mercy? Go.
Yes. It is a
good answer.
It is a corporal work of mercy for the other. I would say it could be a spiritual work of mercy for the other. It is definitely a spiritual work of mercy for myself.
Yeah.
I love being the office barista. I love you being the office barista.
Yeah, I was sad when you guys moved out.
I appreciate it.
I really enjoy that time of making that pot of coffee to share, and it is a way to be generous, to share. I have spent so many hours now learning how to make a good cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I enjoy making a good cup of coffee for myself, but it is so much more powerful, and I love doing it so much more when I can do it for someone else as well.
Yeah. That's an aspect of this that I did want to get into. And another important piece here, when you get into something, again, whatever that might be, this coffee or this episode's about coffee, but we could have replaced it with gardening or cooking or different kinds of art or music or wine, whatever. Yeah. The point is, when you get into something and when you get into it with the proper attitude, this humility, this awe, this wonder, then you recognize that it's like the blessing of that thing that God's given to you, and he's created the appreciation in you, and you've gotten deeper in it. Now it's for others. Now you can share it with others. And I love, especially in our modern world where we have a lot of high ideals and a desire to help, but mostly we sit around on social media and share memes. I love when we have like concrete physical opportunities to serve other people. To, like we do, Teresa and the moms of the community here do meal trains for one another. So a mother has a baby, she's, laid up for a while, she's recovering, and for weeks on end, they will bring her meals every single night. And that's a gift for her, but it's also this amazing gift for the people doing it, because suddenly I've got this tangible, concrete thing I can do for you. Yeah. And if it's something like coffee, where it's not just coffee, but it's something I've learned to appreciate, I've grown and I've practiced, then so much more love can be in that process of, I really worked on this hard for you.
I love thinking of what particular meal and what dessert I'm going to bring that mom. Actually, we were thinking about it, but a certain guest who I'm very excited to welcome into our home next month, but I won't say it because I don't want to be poofy. But I was just like, what does he want to eat? Yeah. Like, what kind of dessert will he like? I love thinking about what that mom's going to want while she's laying in bed. Like, is this a week after she's had the baby, or is this 2 months after she's had the baby and the kids are running around crazy and she's even more crazy than when she had the baby in the first place? Yeah. I love it.
Yeah. And another connected aspect of that too is with coffee in particular as a thing. I think all of us here, and probably people watching, coffee has this interesting relationship to our schedule and our routines too, right?
You gotta have your morning coffee.
Yeah, it's part of that ritual,
Yeah, I will admit that I do have a coffee machine that's on a timer, so that I can have my first cup of coffee in the morning. I still put good coffee into it, but even though I do love making, French press or pour over or Turkish or any other thing that really takes a lot of time, I also do appreciate having my coffee that's ready for me as soon as I wake up.
Yeah.
I noticed when we stopped using a coffee maker and we started using the pour over, it was really hard to get out of bed because you could just push the button and know that coffee was coming. With the pour over, it's like, I'm just going to lay in bed until JonMarc gets up to make the coffee. And I think it was like a vice versa thing, or we were both thinking the same thing. Like if I lay in bed long enough, she'll have enough virtue.
I'd say that was my way. I think one of the first big ways of serving my wife after we got married was we did French press for a number of years, and that's all we did. Yeah. And so I would get up in the morning and make the pot of French press, and then the smell of coffee would get her out of bed. Yeah. But it was a good way to serve her.
Yeah. Well, it's the same thing with me. I actually, the other day, I must confess, I was going to men's group. Seth and you and I are in the same men's group, and I went to men's group, and I was thinking to myself, well, I'm going to have coffee there, so I'm not going to make the coffee here. Teresa can do it later. And I left, and I got all the way there, and then I thought, I didn't make her coffee that she was expecting. That's part of her normal routine. I normally do it, and I just kind of abandoned her there with no coffee.
I drank cold coffee from the day before. I didn't even notice it until I drank it, and I was like, well,
I texted her to apologize. I shouldn't.
No, I wasn't mad. That's great. I appreciated the text.
Yeah. Well, wrapping up then, just a few more fun questions. Seth, so as we've talked about, again, the point of this discussion, it's not that, we're expecting the listening audience to all become, coffee connoisseurs necessarily, but we're encouraging some depth. We're encouraging that, if, especially in our noisy culture, there is something important to simplifying a little bit and picking some things and going a little deeper. So in that context, but talking about coffee, tell us about some of your favorite coffee.
Well, we had this conversation before, and say this quickly just so it doesn't take too long, but you have the different regions, and if people that really get into coffee, they have their favorite region. All of my favorite coffees are all from Africa. I would say most of them are Ethiopian. I've had some great Rwandan, Kenyan coffees, but my favorite coffee is definitely from Ethiopia. The best coffee, if you can ever find it, and this was the one that I had in that Ethiopian restaurant, Ethiopian Harar. It has these amazing blueberry notes to them.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
This other coffee, this is another really great Ethiopian Aromia. It's another really great one. A lot of the Ethiopian coffees, they're strong, they're very smooth. A lot of them have some sort of a fruity overtone to them. But yes, that is definitely Ethiopian Harar. If you ever find it or have a place that will serve it, definitely order it.
Nice. That's a lot of fun. Teresa, what's your favorite coffee?
Whatever you make, babe. Actually,
Ethiopian Harar? No.
We have 4 different coffee roasters in our small town of Perrysburg, Ohio, or like right around Perrysburg, Ohio. And so I would just encourage you, if you're interested in getting involved in coffee, look in your town specifically. Literally, you might be able to find them at your local farmers market, or ask at your local farmers market. They might know some coffee roasters, but you can find someone who loves coffee really close to you.
And get into a conversation with them.
Because when you found someone like that, you found someone who has a wonder for a thing. You found an interesting person to connect with, because they've become in awe of a piece of God's creation, and you can have a good conversation with that person. Well, thanks again, Seth, for this fun conversation, and thank you for watching Elevate Ordinary. Oh, I forgot to give the shout outs at the beginning. I want to encourage you, if you enjoyed this program and you enjoy what we're doing here on Awaken Catholic, to visit awakencatholic.org/donate and become a part of the Awaken Nation. One time, a recurring donation really helps a lot, helps us keep the lights on, help us keep developing this content. But also, a really cool app that you can download to use in the morning with your morning cup of coffee is the Hallow app. Go to hallow.app/awaken. It's a Catholic meditation app. It's really cool, really neat functionality. I've used it myself with my morning cup of coffee. It's a great little morning routine, and it also supports the work of Awaken Catholic. So thank you for your support. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again next time. God bless.
This show and all media on Awaken Catholic is made possible by the Awaken Nation and the Hallow app. The Awaken Nation is a community of people like you who support all things Awaken for as cheap as a cup of coffee a week and get access to exclusive content. Learn more by visiting awakencatholic.org/donate. Hallow is the only audio-guided Catholic prayer app focused on contemplative prayer and traditional Catholic meditation such as Lectio Divina, Daily Examen, and the Rosary. We here at Awaken all use Hallow every day and love it. To learn more or give it a try, visit hallow.app/awaken.